I've done entire shows.
Hold on, it's going live now.
Okay.
Hi everyone. I'm hoping you can hear me, and there's a bit of a lag on this screen. I'm just waiting my confirmation that I'm live and you can hear me. And we are. Or volume down. Hi everyone. So tonight we've got a special guest. He's been on the channel before with me. I'd like to introduce to you once again Jamarl Thomas from the US, the Progressive Soapbox. Say hi, Jamarl. How are you?
What's happening, guys? Hope everyone is okay.
Jamarl, how's it going? Because at the moment we've got the three major superpowers in the world, or three of the major superpowers in the world, the UK, France, and the US, all seemingly in the midst of governmental crises. You've got the UK government over here, which is, let's face it, facing a constitutional crisis. Although somebody said the other day, we don't actually have a constitution. And I thought, well, there's one thing that Venezuela has got that we haven't got. And you've got France. Every time I don't know whether you get this feeling as well. I'm assuming you do. But every time I get the feeling, every time I go to a story about France, I'm expecting anytime soon that I'm going to be writing a headline from one of my videos that include the words Bastille and stormed. And then we've got the biggest story of them all, Integrity Initiative, and I'm not even touching on Brexit. Yeah. So I thought, since you're an American, we won't talk about Brexit because I would be boring you with it, and you would be asking me loads of questions because it's really complicated.
I love that story. That story is fascinating to me. It's international politics and local politics kind of merging. In this odd way, like, you know, the overarching theme of, okay, what's, you know, the iconography and everything of what it means to be British becomes less important than the Labour Party gutting whatever Theresa May puts up. Theresa May trying to hold on to the Brexiteers versus the people who aren't Brexiteers, and no consensus in the government for anything. And that's where you're at. Like, that's
do you want me to explain it concisely, just in as short as possible, so you can say to your friends, well, okay, this is what it is going on in Great Britain, because you won't hear this on mainstream media.
Go for it.
Okay, what Theresa May has done, what David Cameron David Twatty Cameron, sorry, what he did was he made a major cock-up, because he made a political gamble that he would offer this referendum to sort of the right of the Conservative Party, who had had enough of the EU, and said, we'll give you a referendum if you come and vote for us. And then it was a power grab. He wanted to get into power, and obviously you know this. And then what's happened since is the Tories, obviously it backfired on them because they didn't have an inkling that, you know, people were going to be so angry at the establishment, and you know, everything that it was a, as you know, it was a way to say screw you to the establishment, and they voted against it. And now, ever since, what has happened is Theresa May has wrapped the United Kingdom up in bureaucratic red tape until 20XX, and that date is actually in the document. So she's wrapped the UK up in bureaucratic red tape, because to give the people anything close to actually what they voted for, it could quite possibly lead to the breakup of the United Kingdom, and that she will not do. So she said, no, screw the referendum. We're going to wrap it up in red tape, and then we're going to scaremonger and fear everybody. And the press have gone along happily with this, with Brexit threat to sandwiches, etc., etc. Yeah. With, if you don't take my deal, you get a no-deal Brexit. Knowing that, and actually, a no-deal Brexit, which is the closest of all the offers at the moment to actually what people voted for. So you can see she's made what people voted for that disgusting that everybody is scared of it. And that is, there's only one way that she could have done, and they could have done that, and that's if that was their end goal. And that's my take on it.
So you believe that she was trying to make it so unpalatable that...
What have I said all along, Jamarl? What have I said all along? There's going to be a second referendum. I said that to you the first time we ever
because
talked, and you looked at me like I had two heads.
So the thought is, because she's a Remainer, she was trying to make this so unpalatable that it would be a non-option, in which case they would have to have a second referendum.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily.
Man, I don't know about that one.
Can you come up with another explanation? Can you come up with another explanation? Because
incompetence.
Incompetence is one.
I know that sounds like, because I think when she came out, I think you had a faction of the government that was Remainers, a faction that was Brexiteers, and it was a close vote. It was like, what, 52 to 48 or something
48,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah, it was an insanely close vote. And she's trying to meld these two things. I don't think she wants the political flack from what would be an economic hit by pulling Britain out of Brexit, or pulling out of the European Union, meaning if you're not going to play by the rules, you're not going to be able to use their single market. But simultaneously, she said she was leaving. It's like, how do you have the best of both worlds? Well, you don't get the best of both worlds. It doesn't work that. It's
don't have your cherries.
Yeah, I think it was impossible to deliver Brexit, at least in the way that people want it, because people didn't know what Brexit meant in the first place.
It wasn't impossible. I think it was impossible to deliver Brexit without risking the breakup of the United Kingdom, and I think that's the problem.
That's fair.
I think that's the problem.
Because the thought is, let Ireland essentially unify, in which case there's no issue with Britain breaking away from it because there's no border issue.
Yeah,
but she would never let that happen. Like, that would never.
Yeah, no, of course not. And I mean, we're in a position at the moment where, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn of all people, and this is how some people will look at it, including the DUP, Jeremy Corbyn has been fairer with the DUP than Theresa May, whose government they're actually propping up.
Yeah. And by the way, disagree with her. Like, completely disagree with her. When this new vote is coming up, they're going to vote the government down again whenever she brings it up. That's assuming
it's not going to come up.
It up for a vote.
Honestly, I think she will pull it before they will pull it. I'm sure they will, because as soon as they have that vote, that vote is not going to go through. She's trying to get some Labour Party votes this week by saying, "Oh, we'll make concessions to blah 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 and trade and concessions for jobs," but the EU are saying no. We're not going to renegotiate anyway. So anything that she's saying to them is all just, it's all wishes almost. It's a waste of time. It's not in print. So it's not going to go through. Now, if it doesn't go through, can another government be formed? Highly unlikely. So it has to then be a general election. They're not going to call a general election. They're not going to do anything. And obviously... Now, Burkow did a thing where it's now, if there's a vote of no confidence, right? Jeremy Corbyn's got to table his vote of no confidence then and win that, and then there's obviously the general election. But
he didn't have the balls to call that, though.
They're not going to do anything that leads to a path of a general election. They're not.
I don't think so either.
Peter Hitchens, I've said this. I've said this, and you know Peter Hitchens, you and I will disagree on him a lot, but he's very good on a lot of stuff. And one of the things he is good at is the Tory party. And he has said on multiple occasions now, the Tory party would behead the Queen in Trafalgar Square if it meant hanging on to power. So withdrawing a vote after they've said it's going to go ahead for the second time after they withdrew it the last time, that's the least of their worries. They will have no problem doing that. And I've also thought,
if the government would collapse after that, I mean, like, personally, I think it's, what is it called, a dead prime minister walking? Like,
well, she has been for a year.
She has clung to power in a way.
It's actually quite impressive.
I am shocked by it. Yeah, I am enamored by it. The idea that all of these people have left her government and she is still walking, and it makes it so bad. They had a vote of no confidence from the standpoint of the Tories, and she says, "Look, I'm not going to run in 2020." But you're still on the same plan. The Brexit plan hasn't changed.
It was preposterous anyway, because there was no way they were going to let her run in 2020 anyway. She was like, I mean, you can imagine saying, "I won't run in 2020," and they're sitting there going, "We know you're not going to run in 2020, love." So let's get on to this yellow vest thing then, because this is... this is France, this is the UK, this is the US. This is pretty serious because at the moment the US is partially shut down. So let's tell us about this shutdown. Why has he done this? Because this sounds to me like somebody throwing his teddies out the pram because he can't get enough money for his toy.
So Donald Trump, during his election campaign, had two really big promises. There were others, but
build the
really
wall and lock her up.
Lock her up. We're going to lock her up. We're going to put Hillary Clinton in prison. She's going to be in a jumpsuit. And I'm going to build a wall. And not just build a wall, I'm going to put a little English on it and say Mexico's going to build it. Like, they're going to pay for it. Like, that's the indignity of that. Like, to say, not only are we going to build a wall in order to create a border between these two countries, even though immigration has gone down, illegal immigration has gone down for the past 10 years, we're going to build a wall. We're going to make Mexico pay for it, because somehow it's Mexico's fault that they're sending these rapists and drug dealers to our country. That's the way he's framing this. So because it becomes a campaign promise, everybody understands that that's his campaign promise. Now, Donald Trump looked at this and made this a sticking point of, I'm going to build that wall. And in saying I'm going to build that wall, he seeks to fulfill the campaign promise that he's going to build a wall. Now, the first point, it's not going to be a wall. Even if it's built, it's going to be a fence. They're not going to build walls in that way. It's not going to be this big, beautiful wall in the way he said it. And fact of the matter is, a lot of this has to do with political capital. He's staked so much political capital on this thing of a wall that this has now become somewhat of a sticking point with the Democratic Party, who's usually wet noodles. In this one, are standing strong, saying, we're not going to give you a dime for that damn wall. You said Mexico's going to pay for it. In which case, Democrats are comfortable in their position. There's no Democrat on this country, let alone on this planet, that is okay for this wall. These guys have been screaming resistance at the top of their lungs for the past year, and this is one of those issues that everybody in the party is unified in saying, we're not giving you a dime for that fucking wall. Let Mexico pay for it.
What's even worse I'm finding is, and you know what? None of from the reports I've seen in the mainstream media in the UK, they're not reporting this little, nugget of information. The House and the Senate have both agreed a budget, haven't they?
Yes, they passed budgets. The Democratic Party comes in and says, we've passed the budget for the Senate. The president just needs to sign it.
So Donald Trump is just going, no, I'm not putting my John Hancock in that, and that's it.
Unless you give me $5 billion for the wall, I'm not signing it. I don't care what's in it. That's his position.
So this is... Can you explain what a partial shutdown is? Because I know obviously a shutdown encapsulates all the parks and all that sort of thing, doesn't it? So what's a partial shutdown?
Like parks, TSA, IRS. Apparently there's some areas of the FBI that's going to start be affected. And, like when one area is shut down, it starts to affect other areas just from a systemic thing where one may depend on others. But yeah, the local parks, the TSA, the IRS. Partial just means there are some aspects of the government that still run, but there are other aspects of the government that don't, like the Treasury. The Democrats just passed the thing trying to fund the Treasury. Some Republicans peeled off on this. My thing has been, Trump is going to lose this. Trump is going to lose this because the majority of the population is against him on it. Like even he's isolated himself. This is not a situation where the entirety of the Republican Party wants to build a wall. This is a situation where one guy, the president, has said he wants to build a wall, and everybody identifies it as one guy who wants to build a wall, even though the Republicans may fall in line. Democrats are looking at this saying the public doesn't see us as being responsible for this, in which case we don't have to do anything about this. Let the president flounder, try to get the money for himself. He himself is not putting a signature on it, which means that nothing passes unless Congress gets together and starts to pass a veto-proof legislation, which they could do. If there was a certain number of representatives in the Senate, they could pass legislation to override the president's veto, which is what I think is going to take place. Yes, I think that's going to happen. Because even though Trump may be on this, hell ride of a plan, the public is not. Like, it's one thing if the public was behind them. Like, for example, like the Yellow Vest movement that we're talking about, 70% of the public supports them. That's an amazing number. Like, many of the people who support them, even cops, like even when they were setting shit on fire and turning over cars, you had a majority of the population say, we don't like the violence, but we still support you as an organization. That is an amazing number. When you have that level of support, you can pull off certain things. Trump doesn't have that level of support. He doesn't, the public is against him shutting it down. Yeah. There is a small segment of his base that loves this. Yes, keep them
The-
darkies out of this country.
what I said on my channel last week is it's the segment that's probably never met an immigrant.
Right. I've never met one, but God, we need to keep them out of the country.
And this is for me, this is what that wall is. It's not a physical barrier, really. It's a barrier for people's minds to make people who have never met an immigrant feel a bit safer.
Yes.
Because
that's exactly what it is.
Before I started doing this, I was an internet marketer. We've talked about this before, and one of my websites, I did an investigation sort of into the wall and did an article on it. It was about 5,000 words long. I really went into it, and what I found is across the US and Mexico border, first of all, there's the indigenous wildlife. There's a lot of wildlife there that is protected under law by Constitution, I think. And some of it is really rare. You've got certain type of frogs and shrews and little voles and that are only found in that area. And he's going to come and build a big wall on. Yeah. So that is going to cause problems. And then there's obviously, if you're going to, have you seen the size of this wall? You've seen the huge size of this wall. Yeah. There's obviously infrastructure that you need to build just leading up to the wall, just to get the wall to, because obviously you can't build it there. You have to build it in pieces. Yeah. And there's no roads in a lot of part of this, and then you've got the Rio Grande. You can't obviously build a wall going through the Rio Grande, which is where I believe a lot of the illegal Mexican border crossings are, so that won't be effective there. And when I actually started doing the calculations of it, I did the video and it went from, wall's going to be 4 billion, and then the next time, 5 billion, 6 billion, 8 billion.
Eminent domain is a big deal too. Like, there are people who live in those areas, and Trump is going to take their houses in order to build a wall.
Yes, and even in that article, I found one instance of a lady who lived with her husband on a golf course in Texas, and where they want to put the wall would actually put their house in Mexico.
Yes.
It would put it the other side of the wall. Yeah. And when I started doing the calculations in my head and started doing all this, so concrete and blah, 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 it was coming out at something like 75 to 100 billion dollars to build this frigging thing.
It's an insane number.
But he's essentially
the $5 billion that he's getting for is just a political touchstone. Like it's the $5 billion is not going to build a wall. The $5 billion is just so Trump can say, "I got money to build a wall." Like this is what I mean. Like it's not,
even if it's 4 fences.
Yeah,
four fences 30 foot wide, right? No Mexicans are coming through that 30-foot space.
Yes, that's. When people
$5 billion well spent.
Look at this as a real issue, this is more of an issue of politics. Donald Trump has staked a political reputation on this issue. And even though there are hundreds of thousands, I think it's like 800,000 people being hurt by this because they don't know if they're getting a paycheck. Some of those people will get a paycheck when government resumes. Some have no idea whether they would get a paycheck when government resumes. He's hurting those people for political reasons. Yeah. Like that's what it really boils down to.
But that won't matter to him.
Yeah, he's even talking about like months, maybe even a year of the government being shut down. Like, this is some insane stuff. His problem is the public recognizes that this is him. Like, this is not. Do you remember when Obama had to he was talking about doing the Syrian strikes?
Yeah.
And he eventually pulled out of this and decided not to do it.
And then did it anyway.
Himself. Like, it was him making a choice by himself. It wasn't the other Democrats or anything. It was just him. There's more pressure on it when it's the individual. In Trump's case, it is just him. The public recognizes it is just him. Republicans may be going along with him, but at the end of the day, the wall was his promise. And so whoever is hurt by this, and however long the government stays shut down and all this other stuff, it will be blamed on him. And that's what the polls are showing.
Do you think he'll lose support?
Yes. If he's been... One of the articles that I was reading, the guy was a Trump supporter. And I was like, fuck this guy. This guy was an asshole. The guy was like, he says, I supported Trump. He says, and if I wasn't one of the people being affected by this, I would be all in the tank for Trump on this. Now, that's an amazing thing to say.
He basically just said, I have no empathy whatsoever.
Yes. Yes, I have no empathy whatsoever. But because I am in this situation, I think the president needs to come to some resolution, find out something to do. I was like, you asshole. I mean, ultimately, you're saying if I lived in bumfuck Louisiana that wasn't a federal worker, I'd be all on board for Donald Trump shutting down the government for hundreds of thousands of people to not get a paycheck. That's
Yeah,
amazing. Like that's an
it is important to note though that not all Trump supporters are like that. That's just extreme version. There are
Yeah,
extremes on the left and right.
yeah.
I have to be very careful on my channel. Sometimes I can get carried away and forget that I have a duty to at least be somewhat impartial and at least not go after somebody without saying there were some good things about him too.
Well,
of which my audience always slap me for it. Don't do it, Gordon. He's scum. Don't do it.
So it's funny. I have Trump supporters on my channel, and I have people who are completely not Trump supporters on my channel.
I have a healthy mix. There's a healthy mix.
I try to be fair on stuff that I agree with him on. And I was, Trans-Pacific Partnership agreed with him on. The pulling out of Syria agreed with him on. That's assuming that he does it. There's things what Trump does. I was like, yes, I like that. I agree with that. I have no issue at all saying it. By the same token, I've been honest enough to say what my political ideology is when something is running roughshod over it. It makes all the logical sense in the world for me to go after him if it's something that is running roughshod over my political ideology. Part of that is I don't like people being hurt. And if there's hundreds of thousands of people that are being hurt for nonsense, like I have to that part of me is enamored by this, and part of me even has a certain degree of what's the word I'm looking for? Has a certain degree of admiration for this because he's willing to do this, but it's for stupid reasons. Like, can you imagine somebody saying, unless Medicare for all is passed, I'm not going to sign the budget? I couldn't imagine that. Like, or unless seniors get more from Social Security, I'm not signing this budget and I'm going to the mat for it. Never will happen from the standpoint of the left. But he's willing to do this over something that's utterly and insanely ridiculous.
It's a nice segue, actually, to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, because while Trump is digging his feet in and going, no, and making a political noise and everybody's talking about him, and whether he'll get his own way or not, everybody's talking about him, as they always are. True. He's making noise, and he's making people's lives difficult, shall we say.
Yes, he is.
The progressives, it seems, in the Democratic Party, who are newly elected, of which there's 90 members of the Progressive Caucus, and only 3 voted against PAYGO. Now, I did a little video, sort of an update at the beginning of the year, just after this happened on my channel, and explain what... Okay, so... You know what? You explain it, Jamarl, because it's confused me a little bit, because there's from what I understood, if they passed PAYGO in the House, it would put the kibosh on any progressive things like Medicare for all, like free college, like
essentially,
it would make it difficult. But then I understand there's a PAYGO law.
Yeah, there's both. There's a law and then there's a rule.
Now, okay,
it's a little bizarre. So. The Republican Party pushed through, I guess you can call it cut-go. It allowed them to essentially cut taxes while essentially putting the kibosh on stuff that may be raised. A law was passed for this. So there's a law for PAYGO that has certain lengths, but there's also a rule that they've enacted in the House that's the PAYGO that people were complaining about from the standpoint of lefties voting on this policy. The policy essentially boils down to pay it as you go. If you if something is going to impact the budget, you need to essentially either raise taxes or cut something in order to balance the budget out.
Yeah, which is pathetic. It just goes against every progressive ideal, because every progressive that was voted into the House this year and took their seats this year should know about modern monetary theory, and that PAYGO is just fugazi and a fairy dust.
Well, again, this goes to politics. Now, part of the reason that they did this is because the Republican Party continuously calls the Democrats tax and spend. It's, you guys just want to take money from these good, hard-working Christian Americans and give it to those darkies. That's basically the argument that the Republican Party continuously makes. And so the Democratic Party looked at this and says, well, we're going to hit that argument in the knees by showing that we're fiscally responsible. And by showing that we're fiscally responsible, we're going to, I shit you not, their worldview is being shaped by the Republican Party on this. And they say, they made this argument themselves. Pelosi has made this argument that it shows that we're fiscally responsible by backing a policy of PAYGO. Now, this is amazing. The Republicans Party would get in and pass tax cuts where they would put trillions of dollars on the back of American workers. The Democratic Party gets in and said, we need to be fiscally responsible. We need to not impact the budget. Do you realize we're over $20 trillion in debt in this country?
Who
The
cares?
Republican Party screamed and howled that they couldn't raise the debt limit one red cent. Now, the debt limit is where the government spends money but has to appropriate funds to pay for it, meaning the government doesn't come back after it spends and says, okay, we'll prove to paying for it. The Republican Party started using that as a way of stymieing legislation and putting the government to a halt, saying we're not going to pay for squat, which means that the government will hit a debt limit. This is amazing stuff.
So, right, okay. So the Democrats have done pay-go to counteract something that the Republicans did.
Partially.
Yeah.
Part of it
why?
is the Republicans.
Why?
Part of it is also preventing lefties from getting through the stuff that they want.
Perfect.
Because lefties came in with. Yeah.
Let me explain. Why has Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats then? And this is just me asking a question. I mean, it might be a stupid question. It's just my logical mind thinking. Okay, the logical thing to do would be this. Why, instead of passing pay-go, didn't they try to scrap the Republican fucking thing that they put in instead?
Well, they did. Well, they did. They scrapped the Republican thing, but they created their own thing after scrapping the Republican thing. Like,
they're tying everything up in a bureaucratic red tape.
Your first question is the right one of like, why the hell would you reinstitute another program that the Republicans framed? Like,
but the thing is, if they had attacked this from the angle of that is too much bureaucratic red tape, it would have passed with flying colours, because you'd have libertarians on the right, like Rand Paul, going, yes, I'm all for smaller government.
No, you wouldn't have. They would have. Look, the other part.
Hey, if Rand Paul is a man of integrity, then he would.
Partially. I believe it or not, I like Rand Paul, with the exception of his policy. I like his
he's got a good point.
So the other part to this is the limiting of progressive expansion. Yes. Meaning, in the same way that you have the Republican Tea Party, you have a lefty activist group that came into office that actually wants to get things accomplished. And you could say that the Blue Dog Democrats, essentially the conservative Democrats, or the leadership of the Democrats, who don't want Medicare for all, who don't want expansion of Medicare for benefits, who don't want expansion of education, will put rules in like this and make it difficult for lefties to get their stuff accomplished.
Okay.
With one caveat. They made agreements saying that pay-go wouldn't affect Medicare for all and some of the other priorities that lefties was trying to get accomplished, meaning that the pay-go rule would be waived for trying to pass Medicare for all.
But that's what Nancy Pelosi is against, so why would she do that?
Because
and she's the one who does it, isn't she?
Because there's no hope of getting those things accomplished anyway.
No, but
does that make sense? Like
you try and get it on there, and then obviously they've got the thing in the House. You try and get it passed in the House, or at least put it there, and then you put political pressure. They'll pass it in the House, and then maybe if they've got to put the pressure on. So me sitting here 6,000 miles away, viewing it from my little sandbox, as you call it, I'm looking at these progressives who were elected, who went in there and talking Pramila Jayapal, the Justice Dems. And all I'm seeing at the moment is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from the newly anointed class, who's doing what we're expecting, and Tulsi Gabbard and Ro Khanna. That's all in the House. Yeah. And when I say what we're expecting is these Justice Democrats and brand new Congress, and how many was there? There was a big thing. Oh, we've got how many was it?
I didn't think it was that many. I mean, I know they were saying...
It was like 15 or 16 now. It wasn't a small amount,
it wasn't a huge number, but they had a few people who were in,
So I don't know they were elected on a remit, correct me if I'm wrong, of not going in there and playing nice and voting for one thing that's against your thing so you can get a seat on a table and a nice comfy chair. They were elected on a remit of getting in there and kicking over the table and throwing the chair out the window and making things as difficult as possible and making noise.
Yes.
And what I see is them get in there and just go, okay, we're here now. We'll be as quiet as possible.
It's a. I'm not going to make excuses for them. I don't think they should have voted for the pay-go thing, even if it was just symbolic. I think that's nonsense that you vote for.
The optics of it are just horrible from where I'm sitting.
Yeah. Now, again, many of them voted with assurances that it won't necessarily affect if they try to get Medicare for all through. But again, they're not going to get Medicare for all through. Like, so it becomes
No.
like, no, we're not going to stop you from putting through this policy that we're not going to let you get through anyway. In which case, feel free to vote for it. Because at the end of the day, even if they did pass Medicare for all in the House, which under this guise they could do, seeing as the Senate is not going to do it and the presidency is not going to do it. In Colorado, one of the and I give you an example of why this works. I think it was Colorado. The Democratic Party had a House and Senate, and they were passing like all of this legislation for upping the minimum wage and all like lefty stuff. They get a Democratic governor, and then they're like, all right, we need to tone down these bills that we were passing before. Because you can reflexively be against something when you know that the other party is not going to let you do it. So it's like, yes, we need Medicare for all and healthcare and all this other stuff. And then the moment that a Democratic Party gets in and you have the ability to do it, it's like, all right, we need to talk to the business community and we need to make some concessions.
Jamarl, isn't what you just explained the actions of a controlled opposition?
It is, but it's a controlled opposition with us being.
It's the illusion of one side representing one group of people and one side representing another group of people, but it's not. It's actually two sides representing themselves and playing out a big theatre in front of people with the illusion that they have some sort of choice and some sort of effect on what actually happens with regards. Because I don't see a democracy in America.
It's not a democracy. I mean, 90% of the people who win elections in the United States.
Over here, I don't either, by the way. I don't see one over here either.
It's more honest. Like
yeah, we're not as far gone, but
at least they're believe it or not, they're more honest in the guidelines on the ways in which they talk. Don't get me wrong, Theresa May lies flagrantly when she's in those PMQs, or she cuts her language in a way that gives an illusion that she answered the question, if that makes sense. Like it's like Jeremy Corbyn, somebody would say, look, the HMS, the medical services in the UK have suffered X amount where you have people who are dying in ambulances because they don't have enough service or people working to accommodate the influx during the winter.
I can answer that like Theresa May, no problem.
Well, Theresa May would say,
but Theresa May would say something like, what I'm saying is, and then go off and just answer some fucking different question. They always start it with the words, what I'm saying is, and then they go off.
Before she would say that, though, she would say, we've allocated $10 billion for XYZ. Now, the question is always, but is that enough? Like, clearly, if the real world event is taking place and the person explained to you, then clearly it's not enough. Now, from her being a conservative, she looks at that and says, well, we have to budget our resources, and so some places are not going to get the money that they get. So if I explain to you how much money we put into it, it should be okay. And it's nonsense. That's utter nonsense. It takes a certain amount in order to make a particular system work. And if you're paying less than that amount, then the system is not going to work. It's an aggravating way of arguing, but that's how she does all her PMQs.
Well, yeah. I for one, I'm fed up of it, and I know a lot of other people are. I want to talk to you about this other subject that touched upon before we came live, because this is possibly, it's certainly the biggest story over here, and we've got Brexit.
And one more thing, the yellow vest. Yeah. The yellow vest, one of the things that they're asking for is almost like a direct democracy to some degree, meaning holding.
Yes, you know what? Let me bring this up, because I'm glad you brought that. I want to read this article from RT I saw literally just before I came live, because this is hilarious. So it might, those watching in the stream might stutter. Get to the article, because so this is from RT at the moment. Let me so it says, this is from RT, it says, officials' worst nightmare, yellow vests hope to trigger bank run with financial protest. And this is about France. It says, yellow vest protesters are hoping to trigger a bank run with a nationwide coordinated cash withdrawal.
Wow.
By threatening the French financial system, protesters say they want to peacefully force the government to pass their reforms. So the government have capitulated to... I love it too. If the banks, this is a quote from one of the sympathisers, they call them. If the banks weaken, the state weakens immediately. It's elected officials' worst nightmare. Protesters plan to empty their bank accounts on Saturday. On Saturday, withdrawing as much money as possible in a bid to undermine the French banks. Now, I'm not sure how that's impossible because there's a maximum withdrawal limit on cash machines, I would have thought.
But the assumption is that, all these people aren't going to do it all at once. And so even with the maximum thing, you may, like if you say...
But even then, wouldn't the cash machine just run out of money?
I don't know. Like, I don't know how that works. I know there's a certain amount, like in the United States, they have to keep 10% of the money on hand. But beyond that point, I don't necessarily know if that money is in the bank.
It's a good thought. I'm not sure whether it will work in practice, but it's a good thought. And it says here...
they're just throwing stuff against the wall, but I like it.
This bit's hilarious. So Macron capitulated to the yellow vest and said, right, okay, we're going to have a national debate. And then he installed, for those who were watching this stream, you're going to love this. He installed a woman to sort of be in charge of the national debates. And then she had to resign because the yellow vest protesters protested the weekend because she was getting €180,000 a year salary.
She was getting paid. Oh, wow.
And she's now resigned. She's now resigned. I cannot keep up with France. The last time I checked, I saw a forklift. I saw yellow vest protesters, a forklift running through these massive gates, and I thought that looks like a posh building. It was the French finance ministry, and the French finance minister, or one of their ministers, was being bundled out the back door. Like I say, every time I look at a news flash about France, I'm thinking they're going to be storming the Bastille soon. The way they're carrying on, I've got so much respect for them because they are trying to do this. I think peacefully, and it is. But the only way they are getting violent in the face of I've seen it. The police are, as Jimmy would say, cracking heads.
Yeah. The police's job is to some degree order. They're not necessarily order from the standpoint of protecting you and I. It's more so property. Like, the state, in this case, is this thing that protects property rights. Most of us don't have property, so that ends up with them protecting, other things, the wealthy. I love what they're doing. Like it's a good idea. I'm not sure whether it'll work, emptying cash machines. But the fact that they are coming up with ideas like this, I love. Like they're looking for creative ways of attacking the system.
They're looking for creative ways of attacking the institution and the the establishment. That's what they're it's not about rich versus poor, it's about the poor versus the system. And I think this is something that the media are purposefully missing, and the media, I have seen it in this country, and I've touched on it slightly. I'm going to be watching for more instances very closely, because I do feel as if the media in this country are trying to hijack the message of these people and saying, right, okay, it's all far-right EDL nuts, or it's all Antifa nuts, and do the same thing as they do in America and just try and pit one side against the other. And the reason they're doing this is because if those two sides actually come together, because they are fighting against the common cause, which is the establishment, then they're screwed. So this is why I think, I mean, I can only comment on what I've seen, and I do not trust our media one bit at all. And if they're reporting something one way, I am not going to believe it until I get confirmation from a source that actually I trust.
I agree with you on this. The media, again, is an aspect of the establishment. It's part of the political order, and it fights to protect that political establishment. Like if you notice, the stories that take place, like think of the Yemen war. How often did they mention the Yemen war and the United States culpability in that? They didn't mention that at all. It was only recently where they could use it to attack Trump where it started to become an issue. But that war had been going on for years, and the culpability of the United States in it wasn't necessarily something that the United States would come up even when they talked about the story. Most countries, especially the media, don't necessarily attack the institutions themselves, meaning they don't necessarily attack the system itself. They may find a narrative to wrap stuff around. So Hillary Clinton lost not because the Republican Party was gerrymandering certain districts, or not gerrymandering, but the Republican Party was
cross-checking. Oh, you're frozen, mate.
the Russia thing because that in no way
Hold on,
attacks the system itself.
Jamal, just stop there. Okay. Okay, you repeat what you've been saying for the last, like, 10, 15 seconds, because the screen froze, you see.
For the most part, it attacks, the media protects the system itself because the media is part of that system. That ultimately, they're not necessarily going to allow, when they create stories and narratives, for instance, the Russia thing, the Republican Party had cheated in various countries, in various states, where they would voter ID laws or these things that voter shortages in order to prevent voters from going to the polls in order to protect their candidate. This had more of an outlying effect on Hillary Clinton losing. Many of the states where they did this, the gap between the number of people who weren't allowed to vote versus the number of people who, voted for Trump was far more. They don't bring this up. What they bring up is Trump and Russia, and they run with the Trump and Russia thing because that doesn't necessarily put a pressure on the system itself that allowed Trump to get elected. Same thing in the UK. When the Skirple case came up, all criticism or all inquiry of, well, wait a minute. I mean, do we really know that this is the case? And Boris Johnson was lying through his teeth about it. Shouldn't that bring more inquiry?
I've got some information on that, actually.
Yeah.
I've got some new information on it you might not have heard of.
Oh, cool.
On the
I guess the point is the media protects the system itself because the media is part of the system itself.
You don't bite the hand that feeds you.
That deflects. Yeah, they'll do it.
So I want to talk about this integrity initiative, and the reason why I say it touches on, and this is new to with regards to the Skripal thing over the last few days, because Anonymous have released another dump in the last few days. You probably heard on the integrity initiative.
Yeah.
This Orwellian organisation that is basically Operation Mockingbird on steroids, alive and well in the UK, and has been for quite some time. And they have got their fingers in all sorts of pies in all sorts of countries, and they call them little clusters of journalists, of academics, of all sorts of people who are there literally to just spread and disseminate disinformation of their own. They say it's to combat Russians, but it's spreading disinformation amongst their own people, and also then identifying people who are telling the truth. Those online, those media voices online, social media voices online telling the truth and saying, no, you're wrong, and highlighting inconsistencies in stories, etc. These people have been identified by the Integrity Initiative, and then through sorts of sock puppet accounts on Twitter, they've tagged all the other people who are within this sort of network of this sort of clandestine network. And you can see these sock puppet accounts. I'm doing actually a video. I was hoping to release it today, but I haven't got it finished. But you can see these sock puppet accounts tagging all these members in and all these journalists, and then these journalists going off, and they're going off, and they're, for instance, Deborah Haynes from The Times. She was a defence editor of The Times. She's now works for Sky News. So in one of the previous dumps from Anonymous, she was identified as one of the journalists who were attached to the Integrity Initiative and were doing things like I think we're on phase 2 of this Integrity Initiative now. It's very deep and very Orwellian and very icky, to say the least. And she has been obviously contacting people like Ian 56 and Citizen Halo and Partisan Girl. She was the one who actually contacted them to ask if they were pro-Russian troll accounts. Okay,
wow,
now I've got the DMs from Ian 56 and from Citizen Halo because they kindly shared them with me. You've got Deborah Haynes contacting her, and then you've got Integrity Initiative documents that have been released by Anonymous saying that phase 1 was first level investigatory services on these troll accounts, and also all this other data that's just been dumped is all the information on these troll accounts and how they are connected. And sure enough, Ian 56 and Citizen Halo, you got Deborah Haynes, who has asked all these people and have gone down the list because people have gone to Deborah Haynes' Twitter feed, and she just asked in the open, at this troll, could you please follow me so I can DM you? And then that happens. Right? So it's out in the open. And this woman has released a statement that says, I have no idea who the Integrity Initiative is and have never worked for them. So how? Wow, no way. Who told you? What I want to know is, who told her, if she has never been attached to the Integrity Initiative, and honestly, and I'm not saying she's lying, but if she has never, who told her to get in touch and try investigating those so-called troll accounts. Because if that's her editor, that's the entire newspaper compromised in my mind. Because if her editor has been telling her to do this and she's unaware, as she says she's unaware, now these are all hypothetical questions, and I rarely do these on my videos, which I thought I'll leave them to my live stream. But well, I want to know these questions, because this is a woman who, according to the documents, is red-handed doing this, and is obviously doing what the Integrity Initiative say was in phase 1.
Yeah.
You know, identifying trolls, first-level investigative services. And now she's saying clear as day, I have no knowledge of them. Now, her name's in the documents. So who told her to do exactly what the Integrity Initiative said that they were going to get her to do? There must be someone, therefore, if she doesn't know who they are, who told her, you need to identify these, and never told her why. That, in my mind, that would make sense and would corroborate her side of the story, and that's the one way that she's telling the truth. But if that's true, that's even worse, because that means somebody higher up at the Times did, and if that happened, I suspect it's going to be the same thing at The Guardian and at the BBC and at all these other news organisations where these so-called, you know, journalists, because they are so-called journalists, are working. And I don't trust any of those newspapers at this point. Not a single one of them. I don't care who's writing for them either. I don't trust a word that's actually said in any of them until this actually comes to a head and we find out. Because honestly, Jamarl, honestly, I've been screaming about this now, and others have been screaming about this, and I've seen how that the others who have been screaming about it, who have got a larger audience than me, that have been screaming louder, doing a lot more investigative work than me, getting to the bottom of things. I've seen how these people who are in the Integrity Initiatives, named in their Integrity Initiative papers as being sort of like one of their assets, if you like, actively smearing people who are like me, who are appearing on this graph from the Integrity Initiative to say these are... I mean, did you know they in one of the documents they called for George Galloway? Oh, reconnecting? There was a poor network, it said. I'll stop mid-sentence. You're all on a cliffhanger now. We'll wait for him to come back. Oh dear. Technical problems. Hold fire, guys. I'll be with you in a sec. He'll be back. Hey, buddy. Hello, mate.
Hello.
I've got you.
Okay, good. All right, let me make sure. Let me check the video. I can't see you, but I could hear you, kind of.
It's okay. If you can't, it doesn't matter if you can't see me. You do,
am I showing up?
I've got you back in the on the screen. So yeah, George Galloway was the Integrity Initiative in one of these papers. They called for his arrest.
That's amazing.
Because when you saw, there's a graph. I've got to do a video about it because it's frightening. I'll give away the ending of why it's frightening. But
they
honestly, Jamarl,
for his arrest.
Yeah, and these are high level MOD sort of Integrity Initiative guys. I mean, Jamarl, they were talking about they need to highlight the Russia threat, and if the public can't understand the Russia threat, then they need to take it out of the political space. They were talking a way that made it sound as if, you know, they were going to do a false flag. Face it. it was not a good conversation, and it was coded in a very, very strange way. But Pablo Miller is apparently mentioned in the Integrity Initiative documents, and I'm sure you know who Pablo Miller is, who's
Yeah,
connected to the
yeah, yeah.
Skripal affair. He was his handler. And apparently the meeting with the Integrity Initiative, and I've still got to get this confirmed, so full caveat on that, was from reliable source. Meeting allegedly, I will put that in, allegedly, was between Pablo Miller, members of the Integrity Initiative, and White Helmets.
Mm.
So this is huge,
I'm
and it's coming to the US. And Max Blumenthal, who's a great American,
Max Blumenthal is
has
awesome.
been talking. So I wanted to get your thoughts on it, just to because it's scary for me.
So people have we oftentimes we consider reality based on what other people understand reality to be. Like, in order for us to define what we are, we look around and see how other people are seeing those things. We pick up. It's hard to tell what's us versus what's them. Part of the effectiveness of strategies like this, these sock puppet accounts that attack people, or like you said, Operation Mockingbird, is if you're looking around and the public has a particular discourse and that discourse is loud, there's some people who will be turned on by that. They're not turned on like sexually, but turned on in a political sense, where they attune themselves to the loudest voices in the room, where you have a hard time believing of what's them versus what the loudest voices in the room are. This is particularly effective. I mean, when Hillary Clinton was saying 90%, she had a 98% chance of winning. Part of that was them trying to get people to believe that she was inevitable. This whole argument of her being inevitable boiled to this type of the way people react to public behavior when public behavior is advocating a particular thing. It is problematic in and of itself that aspects of the UK government was spending money in order to attack leader of the opposition under this guise that they were fighting Russians. That is abhorrent. Like,
The weird thing is
amazing.
about it, Jamal, for me, that is the tiniest part of it.
Yeah.
Honestly, that bit, that attacking, they did attack the Labour, they did attack Corbyn, and to be fair, they did make some posts and retweets and whatever, attacking, or retweets rather, were attacking conservatives.
Yeah.
It's the whole Orwellian nature and the whole, we have to track everything that you are doing for your own good. You cannot have any privacy. We have to do 1984. This is exactly what it is. One of the things in that the Integrity Initiative papers that I've noticed has done is that they were asking for funding, and this funding was actually turned down, but they were asking for funding from all the likely suspects, imagine, to what did they call it, to expose the Tor network, to actually to go into, or the Onion browser, Tor, that people use, journalists use, by the way, a lot, to talk to each other anonymously. Track that as well. So and I'm no geek, but apparently 5G is going to be the death, if you listen to some geeks, the death of privacy.
I don't know enough about 5G.
I've been looking into it a little bit. You know what it's like when you start investigating stories. You start ending up going down avenues, and then thinking, oh, well, hold on a minute, I've got to look at the other first story first. I'll do a 3-point turn out of that, and I'll come back to that one later. But there were a lot of people, and Anonymous actually touched on this in their message as well when I think it was no. They actually did mention 5G. I've seen a lot of other geeks who are all fretting about 5G could be 2019. This could be the last time you have any sort of privacy.
I feel you. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know enough about it. I've heard people make arguments that they started or they learned about 5G by using, it wasn't originally technology for internet, saying that it was technology for something else that they applied or realized they could apply to it. I gotta be honest, I don't know enough about the 5G network thing. I agree with you about the Integrity Initiative thing, though. But keep in mind, in the United States, we've had accounts like this forever. I mean, the CIA in and of itself was a disinformation network that's been going on for years, where they built accounts to essentially mimic other countries as they attacked other countries. Like I guess I'm saying these techniques have been used, and this is not a justification for it at all. But you've created like a mini CIA of sorts, with a specific mandate to go out and essentially provide disinformation for opinions and perspectives that they find in the least bit contrary to the prevailing notions. Let's say it that way. Like I agree with you, man. It's like when they found what was recently, maybe a few years ago, the United States military, it was uncovered, had a military branch dedicated to essentially be hackers. The same thing was true with, of course, for Russia, of course, for China, of course, for what was the country? What was the country? Israel. Israel. There was another thing where they found Israel had accounts purely to go off of sock puppets in order to go out and to attack others. This kicks it up a notch because it's coordinating itself with other media organizations to create coordinated, organized attacks on certain ideas and certain people.
Yeah, it's not just media.
There's a groundswell.
Not just media. It's academics, it's professors, it's
and like you said,
all
Galloway,
sorts of
that they don't like. And like you said, metastasize. Like they were using that influence not just in the UK. I think one of the stories came out with something in Amsterdam or something where the person was trying to get a job and they didn't like.
I know the story. It was Spain.
Yeah.
It was Spain. There was a socialist MP who was about to become minister for. I think it was minister for defence, but don't quote me that. And they got to work in their little cluster and slapped a load of disinformation around, and before you knew it, this Kremlin stooge, as he was being labelled by these journalists, so-called journalists in the cluster. Before you know it, he's not going to get the job anymore. So that is the United Kingdom directly interfering in the politics of another country. What have we been accusing Russia of doing for the last 2.5 years?
Have there been any investigations into this in the UK itself once this was exposed?
Anonymous. We've had a few politicians. There were a few politicians, actually, not just Labour politicians. I don't think not just, but there have been a few who have been asking questions in the House of Commons. And so far, Alan Duncan, in his slimiest way possible, because that's who he is, has batted them down and obfuscated and answered different questions to what have been answered. But Anonymous have said until their messages, until there is a full investigation by this by the UK Parliament into the Integrity Initiative and their dealings, they will continue to release documents.
Well, they're doing God's work.
In another 10 days, if it isn't announced that there is a parliamentary investigation going to happen into this, in another 7-10 days, you've got to expect another anonymous dump and more people to be indicated in it. It's you get to the stage where these are the people that they are, let's face it, instructing to slander people and instructing to smear people, ordinary people online who were telling the truth, by the way. They are doing this with taxpayer money. And these are the very people who we trust, and we are meant to trust them to inform us of what the actual truth is. And they're the ones who were spreading actual fake news at the same time. And it's so Orwellian and so intricate. I can't think of the word now. It's so complicated.
It destroys any notion of trust.
In the media in the UK, trust in the media in the UK is the lowest in Europe. How low is it going to be after this?
Wow. Yeah. I mean,
scary time, man.
I'm always amazed that the media in the United States pretends as if stuff like this doesn't exist. Like, so when they're doing a story, they will report the story. And when somebody brings up, well, wait a minute, how do we know that this is real? I mean, there's been other situations where you guys have either lied. I give you another example.
Case in point. Let me stop you there. Case in point. Right. Mm-hmm. You say, they don't. Case in point. I saw this tweet today by Code Pink.
Yeah.
And she was live tweeting whoever controls this Code Pink account. I'm sure. Oh, I forgot.
How sexist of you, sir, to say that.
Yes, yes, very sexist. I forgot her name now. So she was live tweeting Pompeo's speech today, and she said there's about 10 of these. So go to Code Pink and it's brilliant. She says Pompeo's speech. Sorry, Code Pink has said Pompeo's speech so full of lies. How about this one? This is something Pompeo actually said today. When the job is done, America leaves.
That's not true.
His next one.
I don't even know what that means. I know why he's making the argument. He's trying to bolster Trump's, we're pulling out. But we've been in Afghanistan for what, 18 years?
Yeah.
What does it mean for the job to be done?
How about this one? We withdrew from the failed Iran nuclear deal. Well, it's only failed because you withdrew from it.
Yeah. That is Orwellian, by the way.
We've never been
literal doublespeak.
Is it honestly, Pompeo today, word for word, we've never been an empire builder. What planet? Seriously. Pompeo, this is all from Code Pink. All in one little speech he did today. Yeah. The Trump administration will continue to press for peace between Israel and Palestine.
See, this is the problem with words. I mean, this is the failure, or to some degree, the extent of words. Like when you get to a point where people say things that gives across one connotation when the reality of it is the exact opposite. Like,
but
so
don't
it's like
you
we're
think,
trying to
but don't you think
Palestine and Israel by making Palestine capitulate and breaking them in half, like, just this brutal fists towards Palestinians with all the support in the world for Israel. That's how we're trying to create peace. Like, that's an amazing thing to say.
But don't you think the only reason he can get away with doing that is because the media don't pull him up on it?
That's true.
They let him get away with these lies and they just repeat them, verbatim. And they never actually say, well, actually, no, there were several instances of this, that, and the other. I mean, there are so many of these. Pompeo in Cairo today said, we will sanction Iran until it acts like a normal country. What do you mean a normal country like Saudi Arabia?
Here's the thing, though. From the standpoint of the media, Pompeo couldn't get away with that if that was Donald Trump lying about something.
No, and that was exactly what I was going to say. If it was Trump, they'd be all over it.
Talking about issues of state, in which case the media is not necessarily going to challenge issues of state lies. This is kind of what I mean when I said the media is part of the established order of things, and they're not necessarily going to attack that. So Pompeo can say, we're not a nation builder, because from the standpoint of the United States dogma, the United States is not an empire. Or we're trying to help the peace process between Israel and Palestine. Well, because from the United States dogma and propaganda, we've been, fighting for this peace process for the past 50 years, despite working with Israel, to build nuclear weapons and to take houses and everything else. Like, there's a difference between Donald Trump giving a speech about a wall, in which case they will have a fact check that goes, pages long, versus Pompeo or even Trump making statements that are just as fallacious, but are about the state, the nation itself. You can get away with those lies. You can't get away with the other ones.
I'll keep an eye on that. I'll keep an eye on from when they fact check Trump on his normal lies to when he fact checks Trump on his historical lies. I'll keep an eye on it.
Keep a look at there's a video where Trump did recently where he's essentially begging for money for the wall and trying to blame Democrats. The entire video could have just been, it's Democrats' fault and not giving me my wall.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and if I am wrong, we'll leave on. I'll edit this out. No. Oh shit, we can't. We're live. I forgot about that. But correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't the Democrats and Trump outbidding each other for the airtime on the commercial before his address the other day?
That I don't know.
There was something about.
You mean when
he raised a GoFundMe, didn't he? Because he wanted his political message to be played before his address. So then the Democrats outraised him. And I thought, are these two political parties outbidding each other? But by the way, fundraising to outbid each other as to who plays the commercial before he does his speech. Because if that's the case, then there's no fucking hope, and America's gone too capitalistic oligarchy for anything to be real anymore.
You think that, but see, here's the catch. The dirty
I've got to
little
be wrong about that. I must be
purely
wrong.
propaganda from the standpoint. We were already there. Like Donald Trump getting elected and the stuff that Trump is doing. This is not. I understand people like his tone is different, but do you realize in the United States, the election, 90% of the elections, the side with the most money wins. 90%. So essentially, the overwhelming majority of people who fundraise the most essentially wins the election. What does that mean that your focus is? Is it on voters or is it on fundraising? 70% of the time that politicians spend in the United States is spent fundraising, essentially out begging for money. Like we're already there. Like the capitalistic thing wasn't something that came in with Trump.
No.
That was already there. That was already in place. The political ads, Obama raised $1 billion in that last race. Think about that money. Hillary Clinton raised over, what, 1.3, 1.4 billion dollars. She could burn the money on the lawn.
Yeah, but $4,700 worth of Google ads from Russia. That's what swung the election, Jamarl. And $100,000 from Facebook, of which 50% of that was actually after the election.
Do you realize how insane that is? Like, but that's the argument that these guys are running with.
And this is the argument that the media are running with.
2 years.
So are there any outlets in the media, in the mainstream, that we can actually trust?
So I don't necessarily.
I mean, the New York Times had to do a retraction, didn't they?
I don't trust the mainstream media for their perspective. I trust it for just the basic details, and even with that, I'm somewhat skeptical on if I can't cooperate it. Like, so this event took place on this particular day at 4:00 in the evening with birds chirping or whatever. Like, there are details that I'm okay with. When it gets into the shaping of a perspective, that's where I become far more rigid and less influenced by what's being said, because you don't have a choice. Like, it's like, how do you report it? You can't be a stenographer. You know what I mean? Like, you're forced into this thing of trying to understand it, because oftentimes the story is being shaped in a way that tries to camouflage something that they don't want you to see. Like the Syria thing. They come out and say Bashar al-Assad dropped a bomb in Syria that gasses on people. You say, okay, fair enough. Where's the evidence for this? Well, Mattis was like, well, we're still looking for the evidence for this. Yeah, but you've already did a missile strike. Well, I know, but we'll find the evidence. And it's like you find out they were using like tweets and Facebook posts from the White Helmets in order to craft the story.
From the White Helmets, from information from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is in Coventry, 25 miles from me, who got £195,000 grant from the UK government for recording equipment and camera equipment. And
that has no influence on decision making.
That has no influence on the way he reports stuff to the BBC and the Guardian and all the other press, though. And they Orwellianly call it the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, as if it's some giant charity doing the saints' work in Syria. One guy with a lot of money from the UK government.
Yeah, I guess that's what I mean, though. Like, the media reports
controlling the narrative, controlling everything that is said, and it's controlling everything. It's keeping everything in house. If they're quoting people like Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, like DFR Labs, like Ben Nimmo, like Elliot Higgins, like Bellingcat, like any of these people who are associated to non-governmental organisations which are funded by the government, any of them, whatever they say is not. It could be the most brilliant piece in the world. It's instantly dismissed. Yeah, because it's compromised.
Yeah, it's coming from particular people. Yeah, it's not enough for what they say. You also have to know who's saying it. Like, who's saying it becomes dramatically important in the story itself, because who's saying it could be massively compromised by their associations or what they're taking to be true. For example, what's the guy from The Guardian, Luke Harding? Luke Harding pushed out that information for Julian Assange, essentially saying that Manafort was visiting Julian Assange. Now, this was utter nonsense. They had the logs, and in the logs itself, it never showed Julian Assange having a visit with Manafort. No pictures were available for them having this thing. And essentially, the
Most
intelligence.
surveilled property in the UK hasn't got any.
Yeah, right. They spoofed intelligence reports to get the Luke Harden, and Luke Harden just published it. Now, people who want to find a link between Trump and Russia don't necessarily need to think that extra step of saying, well, wait a minute, this seems like bogus. The Guardian's not answering any questions on this. Nobody else is corroborating this. This doesn't look right. Doesn't stop people from reporting that nonsense that Luke Harding reported as being an actual fact, and then basing a story and building a story from the nonsense that Luke Harding pushed. Yeah, you have to be careful.
Well, that's why people like you and I are needed, Jamal, because I don't believe that there. Well, I certainly think that if there is a fourth estate at the moment, very thin, by a very thin thread, both sides. And I want to thank you for what you do, because you certainly have. I've learned a lot off you over the years, and so yeah, keep fighting. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
Not really. I mean, you can check out my channel at Jamarl Thomas, Jamarl Thomas, or if you put in the Progressive Soapbox on YouTube. I put out tweets and so forth for the stories that I'm thinking about considering. And if you want to help, you can always support the content through Patreon, but check out my channel.
Absolutely. Jamal also covers a lot of British stuff as well. So and obviously around the world, it's not just. Yeah, so stick around after, if you do watch any of his stuff, stick around for afterwards. You find out all manner of things.
The after shows.
So thank you very much for your time, Jamal, and yeah, we'll no doubt speak again very soon. Thank you very much, mate.
Man. Thank you for the invite, man. I always appreciate you coming on, and I always appreciate coming on your show. We always have a good time, and the audience seems to always enjoy it, so I appreciate it.
Appreciate it too. Thanks very much, and thanks very much, everybody. Peace. Till next time. Take care. Love you all.